Welcome to the CFO Whisperer podcast with your host, Declan Tyrrell.
So what I'm going to offer up here is perspective. I don't offer up fact, and I certainly won't pretend to understand the buying environments in which you're operating into. There will be some commonality, and there will be some things that, once challenged, we can tweak, we can align, we can make work for you. But what I'm not saying is here is one way the world works, because that's not it. Context is a huge part of what we do. So with that said, buyer tactics and negotiation. The buying process. Well, the buying process used to be simple. The buying process used to work is you found the person with the problem that you were solving for. You convinced them you had the right product, solution, service that they needed. You did some type of discussion, negotiation. You built a bit of trust and credibility. You did your deal and away you went. That's gone. What we're now seeing is more complexity in it. What we're now seeing is there's two processes that run in parallel. The first process is, as I said, find a person, find a buyer. That's all right. So find a person who needs what you got. The second process that runs in parallel is you need to empower them to influence their internal stakeholders to allow this to happen. This is where most of the buying and selling happens. We're seeing now, particularly in the last 12 to 15 months, with an economic downturn, we're seeing far more financial scrutiny around projects going ahead. We're seeing the Office of the CFO, procurement, whole different sort of economic buyers stepping into the process. So it's not enough to be able to identify the person with the problem, convince them you have the right solution, find your buyer. That's not enough. It's a good start, but you now need to help them navigate that buying process. So there needs to be two of you in it. You need to help them navigate your sales process, and they need to help you navigate their buying process. Now, the other thing I'd say about buying and selling, it's similar. The key difference is that we're not always in the same stages at the same time. So if I look at particularly anything significant spend, you have transactional spend, and that's fine. People go and I need this, they go and they buy it, and that's cool. And that's typical buying. When you've got something more substantial, or if you've got something a bit more strategic, it becomes far more complex. And what we see here is, for me to go to market to invite you in to talk to me about a particular issue or a new capability we're looking for, it's not that simple. We need to go and get some type of authorization. So if it's on the technology front, we might have to go to a system steering committee, request funds to go. We might be asked to do a feasibility study. We might do a project proposal, which then gets approved, which includes things like who the main players in the market are, what our competitors are doing, how much we need in the budget, what type of timeline we're looking at. These are all key questions that get agreed before we go to market. So it's not unusual for us to know what we want, who we want it from, and how much we want to pay for it before we invite you in for discovery. And you can arrive in and believe you're at the discovery stage of your sales process, which you are, but I could very well be in the negotiation stage of my process because I already know that I want you. So the key question I say here is, it's not enough to simply know where you are in your sales process. You've also got to be aware your customer is in their buying process. That will help you navigate it much, much quicker. Now, that's kind of process. If we drop it down a bit and we start looking at some of the tactics that we deploy. So what can I say here? One of the most obvious, or one of the most typical ones we use, is we'll often have some type of procurement process where we need to invite usually a minimum of 3, often more, into the process. Now, here's how we do that. If I've gone through my process and I know who I want, what I want, and how much I want to pay for it, I'll invite you in. Now, I'll also invite in your arch nemesis. Most organizations have at least one key competitor that frightens the life out of them. Now, that could be different in different parts of the globe, but I'll invite in the one that frightens the life out of you because I can use them to beat you up around negotiation. The third player I often invite in is some type of wild card. It might be a regional player. It might be something off the wall. Normally something I do no intention of going with, but they will either be that cheap or that innovative or some factor that will frighten the life out of you that, again, will keep you and your main competitor honest. That's how we approach these things. Now, one of the key questions that needs to get out, and it needs to be split into two. The question I often say here is question number one, should the customer do the deal? If the answer to that is yes, then how should we structure the deal? Those two questions need to be separated out. Where we stick them together, we often run into problems with customers where they want to buy, but they don't want to buy the way we're selling. So we need to understand how to structure the deal in such a way that makes it easier for their stakeholders to say yes. And sometimes that's a physical thing, whether it's CapEx, OpEx, how it's been structured, the length of time. It can be that tactical. Sometimes it's just down to terminology that gets used. There might be something that's a hot topic with the CEO at the moment, and if we can package this as a green initiative or something like that, then all of a sudden it finds that it's much easier for the stakeholders to say yes or not. So the two questions, should we do it? And if the answer to that is yes, how should we structure the deal? Now, there's a couple of other things I would say here. And I call this one align to my value. So this is where, if we're talking about multiple stakeholders, it is not enough to have a good business case, good business justification that will work with every single stakeholder. It's more complex than that. And I'm going to give you one story that kind of demonstrates this. And this is back in my CFO days with Willis. I did a lot of our mergers and acquisitions, and our CEO came to me one day and said, Declan, I want to go to China. And I said, oh, please tell me it is on vacation. He said, no. And China was just opening up at the time. He said, China is ready for Willis. What do I need? I said, you're going to need a war chest of $50 million. He said, Declan, go get me $50 million. I thought, oh, why did I say 50? So here were my options. I could go to the business and I could say, I need 50 million more profit. I want to squeeze. That would not have been a popular move. We were already a tight margin business that was chasing a record number of increased earnings per share quarter on quarter for the last 4 years into the New York Stock Exchange. Asking the business for 50 million more profit was not going to be popular. Second option was, let's borrow some money. This is typically how we've done acquisitions all the way through my career. You borrow money from a bank or whatever financial institution. You use that money to buy a company, and you use the cash flow of the company you buy to pay down the debt that you've got. Problem I had is we had done an inordinate amount of acquisitions at the time, and insurance was going through a consolidation period. Everyone was buying everyone. So I was what you call highly geared and a lot of risk. And had I borrowed another $50 million, it would have increased my risk profile, thereby increasing the variable rates on a lot of the existing borrowing I had. So borrowing $50 million was going to cost a lot more than $50 million. So I wasn't going to do that. So I went to my analysts. I said, find me some working capital. And they landed on a thing called days sales outstanding. This is on average how long it takes your customer to pay your invoice once you've issued it. Now, for us at the time, it was 90 days. 90 days in insurance is pretty good. But we found a way of improving that by 10%. Now, 10% mightn't sound much, but that translated to $120 million. And that's where we got the fund to expand into the new markets. Now, the whole point of this story is, had you spoke to the CEO about challenges, how can we help you, what challenges you face, he would have told you it's expansion into new markets. Had you said, Declan, tell me what your big challenge is, what can we help you with, I would have told you it's working capital. And had you spoken to my regional controllers, the country managers, they would have told you it's getting the daily sales outstanding number down. The exact same issue resolved with the one solution, but it looks and feels differently depending on who you talk to within the organization. So it is essential that you find a buyer and help them buy. Help them navigate that buying process by identifying those key stakeholders and aligning the value, articulating the value in such a way that it means something to each of them. Okay, so that's our tactics and some of that. Now, just negotiation. I'm going to tell you a couple of quick things in negotiation. Negotiation starts at the beginning. Negotiation is not something you do at the end. It's not a closed routine that you do at the end. You're negotiating throughout the entire interaction with the customer. Negotiation starts when you say no. One of the things I've always deployed, or one of my ways in which I would often buy, is a way called the smiling assassin. And this is where I will smile at you. When I smile at you, you'll smile back because the smile is infectious. And I smile at you, I'll tell you I love your organization. I want you to have the business. And if I look into your eyes, I'll start to see the dollar signs forming in the eyes. And if I look through your eyes, which is a window to the soul, I'll start to see how you're spending that commission. I will see new cars, new homes, vacations, children's education. I'll see it all through those eyes. And then I'll tell you, there's one small problem. One of the other executives is pushing your competition and they're cheaper. I don't know if there's anything you can do. They'll say, Declan, there's something we can do. I say, what could you do? We can give you a discount. I say, what's a discount? Well, we'll take the price we've already quoted and we will take a percentage of that and reduce it. I say, you can't do that. We can. But you wouldn't do that. We would. And off they go back into their organization to negotiate on my behalf a better deal for me. Then they'll come back and they'll say, Declan, we did it. We got you that discount. At which point I'll wipe a tear from my eye. I'll tell them there was a reason I knew why I loved them. But alas, I don't think it's meant to be. Competition's dropped their price. They'll say, whoa. I say, don't tell me there's more you can do. There's more. What could you possibly do? We can give you a bigger discount. And they'll go back into their organization to negotiate again a better deal on my behalf. Now I ask you, how many times do you think I will send someone back into their organization to negotiate on my behalf before my shame kicks in? I have no shame. I will send you back in again and again until you come back and say, no, no more. 110% discount is as high as we're prepared to go. Negotiation starts when you say no. Credibility is built when you say no. Clarity is achieved when you say no. So the danger is not that you aim too high and miss it. The danger is we aim too low and we give too much away. No is an acceptable word to be using with your customers. Not only acceptable, it's a word which you'll be seeking out. It will speed up that buying process beyond belief.
Thank you, Declan. Some great insights there. That's all for this episode.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review.